Social Security changes you need to know before you retire. There is a bill sitting quietly in Congress right now that almost nobody is talking about. And I find that genuinely surprising because this affects millions of Americans who are either already retired or planning to retire in the next few years. When I first came across it, I searched everywhere for coverage on it and found almost nothing. That silence is exactly why I decided to sit down and walk through it with you today. Before we get into the bill itself, let me give you a quick sense of why Social Security matters so much in the first place. More than half of current retirees rely on Social Security for at least half of their monthly living expenses. And among people who are still working and planning for retirement, the majority expect Social Security to be a meaningful part of their income when they stop working. So when Congress makes changes to Social Security, even changes that might seem small on the surface, they can have a very real impact on your financial life. The bill we are talking about today is House Bill 5284. At first glance, it sounds almost trivial. The official description says it is a bill to require the Social Security Administration to make changes to Social Security terminology used in rules, regulations, guidance, and other materials. In other words, it is a bill about words. It is about what we call things. And you might be thinking, why does that matter? Stick with me, because I think by the end of this conversation, you will understand exactly why it matters and why you should be paying close attention. What the bill actually proposes. The bill proposes 3 specific terminology changes. Let us go through each one carefully. First change. The term early eligibility age would be replaced with minimum benefit age. Right now, age 62 is officially called the early eligibility age. That is the earliest point at which you can begin collecting retirement benefits from Social Security. Under this bill, it would be renamed the minimum benefit age. The reasoning given by the bill's sponsors is that this new name makes it clearer to people that claiming at 62 means you are accepting the minimum possible benefit. Specifically, claiming at 62 results in a permanent 30% reduction compared to what you would receive if you waited until your full retirement age. Second change. The term full retirement age would be replaced with standard benefit age. Full retirement age, which most people in the financial world refer to as FRA, currently falls between 66 and 67 depending on your birth year. This is the age at which you receive your full, unreduced benefit. The bill would rename this your standard benefit age. Third change. The term delayed retirement age would be replaced with maximum benefit age. Age 70 is currently the age at which your benefit reaches its peak. For every year you delay collecting benefits past your full retirement age, your monthly check grows by approximately 8%. By age 70, your benefit caps out at 124% of what your full retirement age benefit would have been. The bill would rename this the maximum benefit age. Do words really matter that much? Now here is the important question. Does changing the names of these ages actually change anything meaningful for you? In one sense, no. The ages themselves are not changing. The percentages are not changing. The math is exactly the same whether we call it early eligibility age or minimum benefit age. If you claim at 62 today, you get 70% of your full retirement age benefit. If this bill passes, you would still get exactly 70%. Nothing about the actual benefit structure is being altered by this bill, but words do shape the way we think about things. There is a reason marketers spend enormous amounts of time and money on what they call something. The word minimum carries a very different emotional weight than the word early. If you hear that claiming at 62 means you are claiming at the minimum benefit age, your brain immediately registers that as something inferior, something you should probably avoid. Whereas early eligibility sounds almost neutral, even slightly positive, like you are getting access to something ahead of schedule. Similarly, replacing full retirement age with standard benefit age is subtle but meaningful. Full implies complete, finished, whole. Standard implies average, ordinary, the baseline. These are not the same feeling. And maximum benefit age instead of delayed retirement age makes waiting sound like a reward rather than a delay. So yes, words matter. And the real question is not just why these particular words were chosen, but what this bill might be preparing the ground for down the road. The deeper concern behind this bill. Here is what I want you to think about carefully. When the government changes terminology, it is rarely just about clarity. Terminology changes often make future policy changes easier to explain and easier to sell to the public. Consider the history here. When Social Security was originally designed, the full retirement age was 65. Over time, that age was pushed back to 66 and then to 67 for people born after 1960. Each time that change happened, it effectively reduced lifetime benefits for millions of people because they had to wait longer to collect their full amount. If the standard benefit age, as this bill would rename it, were to be moved from 67 to 68 or 69 or even 70 in the future, that would be an enormous change for retirees and pre-retirees. And if that change were proposed using the new terminology, it might be slightly easier for policymakers to make the argument. They could say, "We are simply adjusting the age at which people receive the standard benefit. We are not taking anything away. The minimum benefit age is still available at 62. The maximum benefit age is still at 70. We are just moving the middle one." That framing could make a very significant cut feel much more palatable. And that is the concern worth keeping in your mind as this bill moves forward. The real math on when to claim Social Security. Now let us get into something that I think is genuinely underappreciated. The math on when to claim Social Security is more nuanced than most online calculators, and most mainstream financial advice would have you believe. Here is the basic table of how your benefit is affected by when you claim. If you claim at 62, you receive 70% of your full retirement age benefit. At 63, you receive 75%. At 64, you receive 80%. At 65, you receive 86.7%. At 66, you receive 93.3%. At 67, which is the full retirement age for most people currently, you receive 100%. At 68, you receive 108%. At 69, you receive 116%. And at 70, you receive 124%. As of January 2025, the average monthly Social Security check was just under $2,000. The maximum possible benefit for someone retiring at full retirement age in 2025 was just over $4,000 per month. Now here is where most people make a mental error. They look at these numbers and they assume that waiting is always better. But that assumption only holds if you look at the cumulative total of what you collect over your lifetime without accounting for what you could do with that money if you received it earlier. The break-even analysis. Most people get wrong. The standard argument for waiting goes like this. If you claim early, you get smaller checks. If you wait, you get bigger checks. At some point, those two lines cross, and after that crossing point, the person who waited has collected more money in total. That crossing point is typically called the break-even age, and it usually falls somewhere around 78 to 80 years old, depending on the specific numbers. So the conventional wisdom says that if you expect to live past 80, you should probably wait. If you expect to live a shorter life, claiming early might make sense. But here is what that standard analysis almost always gets wrong. It assumes you get zero return on the money you collect early. In other words, it assumes that if you start collecting at 62, you spend every single dollar of every single check immediately. It assumes there is no investment return, no savings, no compounding whatsoever. What happens when you adjust that assumption? The math changes significantly. If you take that early Social Security money and you set even a portion of it aside and earn just a 2% annual return on it, the break-even age pushes out to around 81 years old. At a 4% annual return, the two lines barely cross at all. At a 5% annual return, the difference between claiming early and claiming late becomes almost negligible out to age 90 and beyond. And here is the important follow-up question. Is a 4 to 5% annual return difficult to achieve without taking significant risk? As of 2025, United States Treasury securities, which carry essentially no credit risk because they are backed by the federal government, were yielding between approximately 3.7 and 4.4% annually. That means you could take early Social Security money, put it into Treasury securities, collect interest with very low credit risk, and the break-even argument for waiting largely falls apart. So, who should claim early and who should wait? This is where things get personal, and I want to be clear that no single answer fits everyone. Your situation is unique. But here is a framework that I think is genuinely useful. Situations where claiming early may make sense. The first situation is if claiming at 62 would allow you to retire meaningfully sooner, and those early retirement years are your healthiest and most active years. There is real value in having time and health simultaneously. If waiting until 67 means you retire with more money but fewer healthy years to enjoy it, that is a trade-off worth examining honestly. The second situation is if you have reason to believe your life expectancy may be shorter than average. Family history of serious illness, existing health conditions, or other factors that suggest a shorter lifespan may make claiming earlier the more rational financial choice. The third situation is if you have the financial discipline and the investment knowledge to take that early money and put it to work at a reasonable return, rather than simply spending it all immediately. Situations where waiting makes more sense. The clearest case for waiting is if you have strong longevity in your family. If your parents and grandparents lived into their late 80s or 90s, there is a meaningful probability that you will too. Social Security is, for most Americans, the only income stream you will have in retirement that is both guaranteed and inflation adjusted. It rises with the cost of living. It cannot be outlived. It does not depend on market performance. The longer you expect to live, the more valuable the guaranteed inflation-adjusted income becomes. Waiting as long as possible to maximize that monthly check can serve as a form of longevity protection. The healthy life expectancy problem. Here is a data point that I think deserves more attention in retirement conversations. Average life expectancy and healthy life expectancy are not the same thing. The World Health Organization tracks what is called healthy average life expectancy, which measures not just how long people live, but how many of those years are lived in good health. In the United States, the healthy average life expectancy is 66.1 years. That is just barely over a year past the traditional retirement age of 65. Compare that to countries like Japan, Singapore, South Korea, Switzerland, Spain, France, and others, where healthy life expectancy is 72 years or higher. What this means practically is that many Americans are spending their healthy, active years working. By the time they reach retirement age, their healthiest years are largely behind them. And if future policy changes push the standard benefit age higher, even more people will be working through the years when they are most capable of enjoying leisure, travel, family, and the things that make retirement meaningful. This is not a small concern. Retirement rates in the United States have been declining across every age group for 2 decades. Among people aged 55 to 59, the retirement rate has fallen from nearly 20% in the early 2000s to around 11% today. Among people aged 65 to 69, the retirement rate has dropped from 76% to 70%. Fewer Americans are retiring, and those who do retire are doing so later. Any policy change that makes early claiming less appealing or that pushes the full benefit age higher will likely accelerate that trend. Why you need to take this seriously now. Here is the bottom line. House Bill 52284 may look like a minor housekeeping bill about terminology. And maybe that is all it is. But it is worth paying attention to, because the words we use to describe things genuinely shape how we think about them and how we react to future proposals. If this bill passes and Americans spend several years thinking of age 67 as the standard benefit age, rather than the full retirement age, it becomes psychologically easier for future legislation to adjust that standard age upward. It becomes a simpler conversation to have. We are not cutting your benefits, the argument would go. We are just adjusting the age at which you receive the standard benefit. That is a significant concern, especially given everything we know about healthy life expectancy, declining retirement rates, and the degree to which Americans depend on Social Security for their basic financial security in retirement. What you can do right now is stay informed, run your own numbers. Do not rely on simple online calculators that assume zero return on early benefits. Think carefully about your own health, your family history, your financial situation, and what retirement actually means to you in terms of how you want to spend your time. Social Security is not a one-size-fits-all decision. The right answer for you depends on factors that no bill and no generic calculator can fully capture. But understanding the rules of the game, including what Congress is quietly changing about how those rules are named and described, gives you a much better chance of making a decision you will feel good about for the rest of your life. Stay engaged, keep asking questions, and do not let the quiet ones slip past you.